By working alongside the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, donors can make more possible right here at home. The Community Foundation's expert team connects individuals to organizations that make a difference on issues of concern for Middle Tennesseans and connect donors to a network of like-minded contributors invested in the community. This holiday season, make more possible through the power of community giving. Learn more at cfmt.org.
Welcome back to another episode of Nashville Scene Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jerome Moore, and so as you can see, my other main co-host is not here today. DP, he's out sick. I don't know. He might be playing hooky. I don't know, but we got a replacement, maybe even a better replacement. We got Alex with us.
I didn't say that.
DP, I'm on you. Now, get well, DP. Everybody in the comments say get well, DP. We definitely want him back, but we have Alex today, man. What's up, man? Welcome.
Hey, I'm the managing editor. I'm glad to be here. Long-time listener.
Yeah, I hope so, because we have a guest here that definitely wasn't paying attention. You can introduce our guest.
Shots getting fired. I see.
I thought this was going to be a more peaceful podcast, but we're joined today by Ciona Rouse, and we're going to be talking about poetry in Nashville. Yes. It's inspired by a story I wrote, kind of asking the question why Nashville doesn't have a poet laureate, despite such a thriving literary community and so much art getting made. And, well, one of the best people to talk to about poetry in town was Ciona. Just about everyone I talked to on background for this story kind of pointed me in your direction. So we figured who better to have on the podcast than you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Ciona, I got all of my poetry history from Rashad the poet.
Oh.
He's like a big brother. We both grew up here in Nashville, so he gives me all anything about poetry. Like him as a poet itself is amazing, but the history and understanding for him, his journey coming up through Nashville and what the poetry scene was and compared to today and things like that. So I'm really excited about this conversation.
I'm extra excited knowing that you do know Rashad because he is one of the people that I always think about as representing Nashville in the world as a poet. So
yeah. So why don't we have, I guess what was the arching question like of your story, of your cover story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't find an exact nuts and bolt reason why we don't have a poet laureate. I did ask the mayor, Freddie O'Connell, if he was interested in establishing one, and we did get an answer that sounds like he would consider it at some point, but for now he just kind of highlighted that we have a youth poet laureate, which is pretty amazing. One of my sources for the story, Major Jackson, he also said that the fact we have a youth poet laureate really shows that we have some kind of value and commitment to art in this space. But I think the easiest reason is that we just haven't had one for such a long time.
Yeah.
But it's still strange because Hendersonville has one, Murfreesboro has one. There's smaller cities and towns than Nashville all across the country that have one, and
the capital city doesn't have one.
And the capital doesn't have one. Yeah. Tennessee State has one as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, and like, what is your gauge, I guess, on the poetry scene today, and like just the evolution of it being now that Nashville is a different city than 10, 15 years ago? Like, who does it benefit? Who does it like? Is it thriving? I want to get into the nuts and bolts of those things and the new demographic that plays a part into that in being Nashville.
True. Yeah, I've been in Nashville now for over 20 years. I'm trying to think exactly, 23, 22 years maybe. And when I first moved to Nashville, I found it really difficult to find, I always said, my poetry people. Mm-hmm. I didn't know where to go. I would Google search. I didn't immediately see the community in Nashville. And so I kind of felt like I had to keep creating it. I would, if I found a poet, I would cling to them and then find out where else they were sharing work or what they were doing. And I remember getting to go to some really great open mics once I started finding what was out there, and then they would last for a while and then maybe they would stop going. But anyway, we have always had actually a very vibrant community, but it was just difficult to find where it was when I first moved to town. And then what I love about Nashville is that it's a place where you can create what you think maybe isn't available. And so I had the opportunity and support, and people said yes to me as I kept creating events around town and creating spaces for poets. And through that, I started finding that people had been doing things in our community for years. Mm-hmm. And it has. We are indeed a poetry city.
I'm always...
Music, move over.
Yeah, well, I was going to get into that because I would say poetry is a form of a music genre.
Oh, I love it.
Right? Like, it's a performance and it can be done in different styles. But is it seen that way in Music City, or is it seen that way over the landscape of the poetry community? Is it seen as a musical genre?
I love that. So I think poetry has musicality to it. Yeah. And maybe it's the perfect thing that blurs between music and literature in that way, that it is both on a page and on a stage, and it lives, both in someone's quiet journal and also expressed in community and aloud. And music can be that way as well. And so they're definitely kindred, even if they're not exactly of the same genre. But it is family. So when I say move over music, I mean it in a good, bratty sister kind of way.
Because one of the many people's favorite rapper, Tupac, would consider him a poet.
For sure. I have his poetry collection.
See?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things I always thought about when I thought about music, but also when I thought about poetry, I'm because most of the poetry I think I'm familiar with always been a performance, on stage. So I'm and it's, got some drums, or even if it's over instrumental, or a whole poetry CD or something like that. So
yeah, and throughout so much of American history, that has been what it ends up looking like, regardless of how maybe you entered into the poetry world. There are places for, Ross Gay is a National Book Award nominee and, highly regarded in the poetry world. And he recorded an album of poetry with music. And then you have hip hop artists who are considered 100% poets.
Yeah.
I remember even in high school, our teacher actually taught Tupac in the poetry lesson, which made sense. And should have been done in that way. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for Music City to celebrate poetry. I think a lot of musicians are also poets. And a lot of poets, if, I am not fluent on any instrument, even though I have a couple that I like to play around on sometimes. But I definitely am paying attention to music when I'm writing and how it sounds.
And I would add one of the people I spoke to for the story, Chet Wazy, I think is how he pronounces it. Wazy, thank you. Sorry, Chet.
All good.
Well, I know he's watching. He's over at Third Man Books, and he brought his own kind of history of music career to his poetry events. He started a series called Poetry Sucks, and the idea was his experience from setting up DIY and punk shows, and he's let's just take that and make it a poetry showcase. And, he spoke to me a lot about, how those worlds overlap and how they kind of inform each other. And, you can definitely see the same way that people build community and music spaces in Nashville. There's people building poetry spaces in similar ways.
Well, so what are those spaces today? If I'm new to Nashville, or if I've always been here, I'm I would love to go hear some amazing poetry, where would I start?
I mean, it would be really great if we had a poet laureate who had a page. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, there is like a Facebook group and a couple of things online where a lot of different organizations end up posting what they're up to. So I think it's Nashville Poetry on Facebook, but not everyone's on Facebook. I think it's great to kind of just find, again, kind of do a quick Google search, Poetry Nashville. You'll find that there are lots of different groups, Po Boys and Poets. We have an organization called Nashville Free Poetry Library. And they put on a Nashville Poetry Festival every year. And it's like once you go to one event, you start to be invited to another open mic that's happening, or finding out, major. I'm forgetting all of the names of everything, but they're
bad timing.
Love Noise, I think, is one. But you'll find you'll find these events that are around town where poetry is happening. It's happening, and it's allowed, and it's.
You seen Love Jones, right?
Yes.
See that. You seen Love Jones, Alex?
I have not.
Oh my gosh, kill him in the comments.
Damn.
No, so
we were on a team.
We on a team, but still, but it's a good movie, great movie. But when I think about poetry,
Oh, of course.
and when I think about Nashville and a place like, I want to go into like one of those places that was on Love Jones, where you can walk in and it can be a good vibe, man. You have food and drinks, but like it's a poetry night, and it's rich in its culture, and it's fun, and it's soft, and it's beautiful, and it's vulnerable,
Yeah.
And so how do we have a space like that now, or something similar that one could attend? Or is that something is that an event you need to maybe do? I don't know.
So I'm actually in the process of opening a bookstore bar here in town.
Oh, is that breaking news? Are people been?
I've started telling people.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, so I've been doing some events around town, just kind of popping up, and we'll actually be selling books. We'll be selling more poetry than most bookstores, because most bookstores just have a single shelf or a tiny shelf of poetry. And so we'll have a lot of poetry, and then we'll have a lot of poetry allowed.
Okay.
And so we'll have these events, and there will be food and whiskey, and we'll have a vibe.
All right, so I got to put you on the spot right now. Right?
Okay, talk to me.
I'm going to start off like local, and then you can give me like your grand list. So top 5.
Oh.
Nashville-based poets that's on your top 5.
Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee transforms thoughtful generosity into lasting positive change, connecting donors with nonprofits to build a thriving, inclusive Nashville. As a trusted partner and convener, CFMT helps caring residents make a meaningful impact today and for generations to come.
Learn more at cfmt.org. Then this is not to offend anybody.
You're gonna get her in trouble.
You know what I'm saying? And so no, this is what people want to know.
Is this what people
want to know? Your top 5 poets.
Oh no.
And this is not to like, if you don't make the top 5, it's okay. You can do honorable mentions if you want to, but we gotta know.
I feel you've seen the movie Top 5. Have you seen the movie Top 5?
I have not.
Okay, Alex.
Getting called out for all my
Alex, you got to get
movies
your
I've been
cinema
missing. I know.
takes up,
We
man.
have
You're gonna like do the Clockwork Orange. Strap me
We
to the
have
chair.
a movie list started for Alex. No, I mean the pressure.
Okay. Let me
of it.
reframe it then. So I'm not going to. Who are some poets that our listeners and our watchers should go check out? Who's some that you would recommend? And that can be 5, 10. How many you want to name?
Okay.
Or what would be your poets here
And locally and nationally?
Yeah,
or just
Just let's start local, and then we
Okay.
can go greatest
Internationally.
Internationally.
Because I do think, people, again, are creating poetry in their quiet spaces, and then it somehow makes it into the world, but all over the place. And so I'm sure there's probably a favorite that I haven't even heard yet, because that person has been afraid to share it. And I hope that everyone feels empowered to get their voices out. But yeah, we have so many poets in town. And again, they're creating, getting it out there. So we do have one of the top poetry programs in Nashville is at Vanderbilt, which of course in the nation is at Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt is here in town.
I didn't know that. I didn't know Vanderbilt was a top poetry program. I didn't even know there was a thing of like a poetry program.
Yeah, so it's a Master's of Fine Arts. And so we have people that come to Nashville through Vanderbilt to study poetry.
Wow.
Which is really exciting. It's highly competitive. And so they always have really great people that are coming through Nashville. But because of that, then there's a lot of great faculty who live in Nashville. I think we mentioned Major Jackson already, who has a great podcast called The Slowdown, where he introduces people to a different poet every day. So I highly recommend listening to that podcast. And again, it's from Major Jackson, who's right here in Nashville. Obviously, we've already talked about Rashad the poet.
Yeah, Rashad. Okay.
Rashad's so great. And he used to do quite a bit with Saran.
Saran.
But I don't think Saran's in town anymore, right?
No, he's not. I ain't going to tell y'all where his location is, but he's on the West Coast now.
Okay.
Yeah, he's out west.
Yeah. Which we miss him. But has been such a strong part of our poetry scene until leaving. You obviously interviewed a lot of people too, so go ahead and jump in.
I did. Well, two other people were Chet, who we mentioned earlier, and Stephanie Pruitt-Gaines, who I think might be held up with her new venture in Donaldson right now, the Creative Bar, which is a really cool black and white kind of wallpapered place. But she had a lot of feelings about poetry, and there were a few people who had strong opinions about poetry and the poet laureate or lack thereof, but not all of them wanted to go on the record. So I was like, and they're all poets, so they all said very great things, and then we're like, but don't quote me on that. And, and like, you just sent me like a stanza.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Caroline Randall Williams is in town. I get to write with her and Adia Victoria quite a bit. Adia is another musician who is also a poet.
Okay.
And so thinking about music and poetry, and we end up getting to do things quite often with her and her music too. I mean, it's like way too many people to start.
I might
trying
become
to
a
name
poet.
everyone.
I think I would be.
You probably already are.
Coming soon.
With all of your traveling.
Coming soon. We're
all the ways you've seen the world.
We're gonna put something together. Coming soon. But what can Nashville do to champion poetry more, to amplify it more from a community level? What are things that is it showing up to events, requesting? But how can we get, especially we have a nationally recognized program here, like how can we better support that art?
I love this. So we do have, obviously I think it's really great when we can get poets into spaces where young people especially can see that poetry is a way to express themselves, a way to interact with language, a way to see the world. And how wonderful if we can hire poets to be a part of that. Yeah. So I've gotten to work with the Nashville School of Fine Arts, the Nashville School of the Arts, and I know that they regularly have... NSA, thank you. They regularly have different writers come in often and pay them to be with the students and let students experience living poets, especially so often the curriculum is just dead white guys. So often, I mean, it's changing a little bit, but often, you're starting with amazing poets in history, but you just don't think of it as a living art form that's happening now. And so the more we can let young people of all ages, I've worked with, an elementary school with 4th and 5th graders once, and we're writing poems together, and they're learning what it is to be a poet. And I think that's huge when we can have poets in spaces. Honestly, I think there should be a laureate for everything. I'm like, I want the Shell station to have a laureate, have a poet laureate. But that recognition that poetry can impact the way you enter into a space. When I've worked with the Frist Art Museum, and we would start our meetings reading poetry when I was working with them, and I think it sets the tone.
It definitely
for how we're going to work together. Okay. So why wouldn't we want major corporations or the Amazon building or a community organization to start their meetings and their times with a poem and to hear and see each other differently.
What does poetry mean to you?
I've loved it my whole life, and I don't think I've ever had anyone ask that question that way.
Yeah, that's why I'm me. No, but what is that like for somebody who's lived it, who's practiced it, who's loved it, who's a poet but also a fan, a supporter? Like, what is your definition of poetry?
Yeah. The beauty of poetry is that there can be so many definitions, because we are all, again, getting to do this ourselves and to create what it ends up meaning for us. For me, I'm trying to think of my young self and my journals that I used to write back when I was a kid, and I loved poetry. And the poets my mom would introduce me to, Langston Hughes and Nikki Giovanni, who just recently died.
Rest in peace, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and who has meant so much to me throughout my whole life. And all of these poets, I think what poetry has always meant to me was that I have a voice and it cannot be caged. And so the idea that even if I don't have a stage to say it, there's always a place I can put it if I'm just writing it down. Or I can be writing it right inside of me. I have an art form that literally I've been in spaces where I was posing for an art class, and so I couldn't move for several hours. And so I was just writing this poem in my head, and it became a mantra. And then I finally started writing it down when I got out of. But if I get locked up in a cell because the world has gone drastically wrong and I can't have access to anything, I still can have this poem in my head. I get to still connect with my art form. And so it's a way of me making sense of my life, my world, and figuring out what it means to be more human.
Yeah. Alex, I got a question for you. What did you I guess learn or find out about poetry that you maybe didn't know? Like, do you have a poetry journal now? Are you actively writing now? Like what did the story do for you about poetry?
I think the idea of why commemorating moments in time through poetry, why that matters, was my biggest takeaway from this, because it's easy enough to be like, we don't have this, but I also had to ask people, do we need this? And for the folks who seemed to indicate that we need this, or at least it would be nice to have, it was the idea of having someone who could capture the moment and the spirit of Nashville, whether it's at the opening of a new building, or maybe at the funeral of a big figure, or it could be like beginning of a sports game or something. Just having someone there who can really I think interpret the air was something Ciona said in one of our interviews. And it's just a way to really distill what are the concerns, what are the motivations, what are our guiding principles, what's the unknown, what's the hopes, really capturing that for a whole community. And it's not easy to do, but something all these poets also express was that poetry, what makes poetry unique is that it really can capture those big emotions in smaller space than a lot of other forms of writing. And, it was also just fun. I write journalism, which even at the scene, which lets us be very voicey and fun and play around, it's drier than the average poem, So it was also just fun to really kind of like nerd out about a form of writing that I'm very much a tourist to. But it's also just nice to hear people who appreciate words talk about them. And I just don't think anyone knows words better than poets, really.
And I also think as Nashville continues to change, I hit the mic. Sorry. As Nashville continues to change and we do open new buildings, I think the poet needs to also be speaking about the buildings that are being decimated or the people that are being pushed out. Like, we need the laureate to be able to speak that truth as well, to name, to memorialize, or to activate and stand up against some of this that's happening. Throughout history, poets have been people who, if you couldn't get to the art exhibition, there would be a poet that would go out into the community and talk about what that exhibition was, describe the art. There would be a bard, they say, that would do that. And so I think, too, there's a way of, if you're not experiencing this yourself, or if you're not seeing it yourself, if you're not noticing how the change is impacting people, and if you're not noticing, where good change might be happening as well, that a poet laureate or a person that is assigned that. And the truth is, whether it's assigned or not, or whether it's celebrated through the library or through the government, I think poets are doing that. We're speaking to it. We're noticing, and we're looking at Nashville, and we are putting language to what we feel is happening. And that does feel really important.
Yeah. Well, I want to leave y'all with the last word. I think, I'm moved and touched in a different way about poetry that I don't think I've explored internally myself, and how meaningful it can be to the topics and the issues, opportunities, challenges, celebrations that are happening here in Nashville. Because I think people are doing it in different mediums, but I think the delivery of poetry is special, and it touches you different than listening to a podcast, or even listening to music in a different way, or even reading something in the Nashville scene. But when it is delivered through poetry, it just moves you differently, and I think that's what makes it unique on particular topics. So yeah, but I want to leave you out with the last word before we go. Anything else you want to leave the people with?
I think, I'm naming my bar. It's called Bardstown. Again, I think we are a town of bards and people that are creating, and poetry does have that ability just to hit us in a different way. I think it's liberating. Maybe that's what I should have said earlier. I've appreciated the liberation of poetry, and when I see someone else free with their language, then I have permission to attempt my own freedom and to recognize ways that I can create my own freedom. So I know that we'll keep doing it, and I do love that we have a youth poet laureate, and I would love to see the city support other poets getting out in the world and helping to liberate us all. Thanks for asking the question. Because I always say poetry is really about questions more than answers. And so the fact that you allowed that question to then be explored is already you being a poet.
So,
Well, my wife's the one who asked the question, actually. And then I asked her if she wanted to write, and she said, no, that's your job.
Well, I appreciate you both. Alex, great job co-hosting, man. We should let you spit a poem or something before we go. But next time.
Okay.
Next time.
But, thanks for having me.
No, thank y'all. Poetry, and we did it. We made it happen. DP, we miss you. Wish you could have been here. Come on back. Get well, man. And make sure y'all like, subscribe, follow, all those good things, and see y'all next time.